I'm ready to slash and burn.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And I'm sure all of the Witch Doctor fans out there are really excited about this one today. I have Andrea Gellatly on the show to talk about Witch Doctor.
Yeah, I'm so excited to finally be on the podcast and get to chat for a bit.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, I am wearing my one piece of Witch Doctor swag, so had to represent for the team. So we're into World Championship 7, coming off of, I'm sure in some ways a disappointing season for you, but at the same time, like, very impressive to get to the finals in both the Giant Nut and Golden Bolt back to back. That's really hard to do. So I'm sure that you were, very focused on being prepared for this season.
Yeah, a lot of people, approach it that way. They think we were disappointed with our performance last season. We got to the finals in 2019 in season 4. And honestly, I thought we got our shot. It was unbelievable to make it to the finals. It takes so much preparation and obviously a little bit of luck along the way. So I thought we had our chance. And to get another chance, like you said, that season was absolutely incredible. And then to be able to do it again the next day, because there was a lot of time in between the airing of the season and the Golden Bolt, but it was literally the next day, another 4 fights, because we had to win our bounty hunter fight to qualify for the Golden Bolt. So it was a huge whirlwind, and I was so proud of our whole team for even making it to 12 fights that year, which is a record. It's insane. I don't even know how we did it. We had boxes of parts that we call them questionable spares, which is parts that we hope to not have to use again, but if we absolutely have to. And we were building like an entire robot out of that box and just Frankensteining motors together and whatever it took. So we're really, really proud of that season. And I definitely, we're not disappointed despite making it to the finals 3 times and not winning the hardware. The competition is just so incredibly strong every year that you show up and you look around and you say, like, half of these robots can hoist a Giant Nut and nobody would be surprised. It wouldn't even be an upset. So, it's just being able to hang among that crowd is something to be proud of for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the sheer longevity of how long, you've been doing this with Witch Doctor. You're one of only like a handful of teams that has been around for basically the entire modern era. And so many like changes and upgrades and things like that during that time. And, this season was no exception. You came into this season with an, upgraded weapon speed and everything else like that, which that definitely showed in that first fight against Ribot. I know after talking to David Jin, I don't think that, they were like half like not excited about it and half like excited for the challenge to go up against Witch Doctor in that first fight. So it was definitely a really good fight and a strong way to come out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I don't know why it is, but they underestimate Ribot for some reason. I mean, Ribot has performed spectacularly. They've been top seed. They've made it to the last few rounds. And they're not always heralded as like kind of one of the top bots. And I'm not sure why that is, because they definitely deserve it. And like you said, we were trying a new brushless system for our weapon this year. A lot of teams have made the change to brushless. We've been very resistant because there's no way to really test this outside of the BattleBots. And while it's great to have some success, as soon as you have some success on the show, everybody expects you to go further the following year. So since we've been to the finals, everybody expects us to win. And that's a huge amount of pressure. And it doesn't allow a lot of room for taking big risks like going to brushless. So we've been hesitant for that reason. We spent 2 years testing the system out. It looked awesome in our first match against Ribot. But we came out of that match with only one motor working. By the end of that match, we only had one side working. And that was a short fight, so we got away with it. But we have Minotaur waiting for us at the end of our fight cards, and that is not going to fly against Minotaur. So the entire fight card season, we've been in the pits before every match. We're getting to every match like right at the nick of time because we're tweaking things and we're changing things and it doesn't work and we have to change it back. So it's been a really, really stressful season in that regard because we've never been confident with what we're putting in the arena. And the fusion fight was an absolute slugfest. So we were glad that, physically it's been battle tested in the sense that it, kind of survives, but we had broken magnets in our motors. We haven't gotten through a match where the brushless system is working fully at the end of the match. So we're still working hard in the pits for that.
Did that match take you by surprise at all? Just because, based on the like Fusion certainly I've thought always has had the capability to do that kind of damage, but it just for one reason or another it never has. So were you a little bit surprised and also kind of just like excited at how great of a match it was?
I wouldn't say we were surprised. We do a lot of homework on each team and we watch every single match we can. But when a robot has a lot of history like Fusion, this is not their first season on the show. It's easy to get complacent and watch their past fights and think that's who you're facing. But we played really close attention to their first fight of this season, and they were definitely showing signs that they were getting much stronger. And we're doing this whole YouTube video series where we show like behind the scenes in the pits. And one of our teammates, Curtis, we have this whole recorded segment with him saying, Fusion looks like they might be figuring it out. I think this is something we need to worry about. And he kind of like, tells the future basically. And one thing that's really difficult about Fusion for us is that they have a vertical and a horizontal spinner, which is really interesting because our first match against Robot, they could have been a vertical or a horizontal. So 2 matches in a row, we're having to, really deal with more versatile type of robots. And the truth is Witch Doctor isn't set up to fight both at the same time. It's set up well to fight one or the other, but not really both at the same time. And if you watch closely in that Fusion fight, we obviously are set up for horizontal. We're trying to go up against our horizontal weapon because we think it's the scarier of the two. But that setup is not set up to fight verticals. And the first or second impact, his vertical spinner cuts our wedge in half because it's not designed to be hit in that direction. And that obviously makes it much weaker because it's shock mounted and it's designed to work connected to both sides. It's unlikely a horizontal spinner would break it in half. We've tested it against Tombstone a few times and that's never happened. So definitely game plan out the window, first hit. But luckily, I think Mike is at his best when everything is going wrong and he just needs to be really, really aggressive. So he really drove well the rest of that fight.
Yeah. Now the next match obviously is against Gruff, and we can't go into the details of that, but I mean, knowing that you were fighting them, what was your thought? Because the interesting thing is, Gruff is known as being a tank. Like they're very difficult to damage and things like that. But granted, Quantum is a very different robot from Witch Doctor, but I think that they demonstrated that you can damage them. Like there are ways to do that and to get them out. So what was your kind of strategy going into that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Gruff is a tank. And I think we were definitely going into this match as this is going to be the ultimate test of our weapon because hitting AR 500 tank like he is the absolute hardest for ourselves because every time we hit ourselves just as hard. So, we've had very, very tough tests of the robot. It's like the selection committee said, they're trying something new. Let me put them through the paces, which I'm not complaining about. It's definitely best to have all these tests in the fight card where you have to put up a good showing, but the win-loss record doesn't necessarily, it's not the end all be all. So it's a good time to kind of try to test these things. But yeah, Gruff is a control robot. We don't have a specific configuration for control robots. That's kind of bit us before. We did have kind of configurable forks for Witch Doctor this year, and we are going to try some for Gruff. I don't think we absolutely need them for Gruff, but because his frame is so hard, we have to assume worst case scenario, we're not going to be able to bite into it. We're going to have to be able to lift them up to hit them from underneath. So we're going to give that a try. Obviously, it's very dangerous because we haven't tried our new forks in the arena. And like I said, we're a pretty conservative team. We try to have everything really tested before. So we were really uncomfortable this season. And I think, you kind of see that in our interviews, and you, especially if you watch our own videos, we go into every fight like everything's about to break because we don't know. And I think it's important to share that side of it, because all the interviews want you to sound super, super confident, like, oh, you're going to win the giant nut. And the truth is, in order to keep up, you have to try new things. And it's just a huge risk every single fight.
Yes, it absolutely is. Now, of course, your last fights against Minotaur, I don't think from a schedule making perspective, there was any surprise that that's something that got put on the card. That's obviously a tough match. I mean, it was brutal the last time you faced them more, a couple of times actually. So I mean, was that probably one that you had to put a lot of preparation into, because that like they're obviously preparing for you. They want to come back and win after everything last season. So you both have a lot of motivation going into that one.
Yeah, I mean, a fight with Minotaur could very well be the final fight of any season. It's really that level fight, and getting that in the fight card obviously is tough. We actually, like, the frame against Fusion took a ton of damage, obviously. So instead of kind of trying to throw it away and use new parts and stuff, we actually left that robot assembled and got it back in working order, because we figured whatever we put in against Minotaur, win or lose, was probably not going to be usable in the tournament. So this is one of those cases where knowing all 4 fights ahead of time actually helped us plan differently in terms of damage. There's no point in feeding a brand new robot to Minotaur because it's going to come out damaged, no matter how well the match goes or doesn't go. Obviously, we knew this matchup was a possibility. And we do have a configuration specifically for Minotaur. Won't share it yet. But yeah, I mean, it's great to know the whole schedule and kind of be able to plan all 4 fights before the tournament, because the tournament could be another 4 or 5 fights. So it's just a halfway point at the end of the fight cards.
Yes, that is for sure. There's still plenty of season to go. It's a very long season, especially this year with everybody getting 4 fights and all of that. Now, a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about just besides the current season that we're in is that something that, obviously is very near and dear to my heart that, Witch Doctor does as a team is all of this stuff. Like, I think more than any other team, you really have so many things that are geared for kids, Witch Doctor Jr., B is for BattleBots, like all of that stuff. What made that be something that you really wanted to do, aside from just like getting kids interested in the sport, because I think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of why we do this and why we put so much effort into the aesthetics and the team aesthetics for Witch Doctor. We have a lot of fun with it. And I think that resonates with kids because they see us having fun, and it's something that's accessible and something that, reaches out to them. I started building robots when I was 14, and that's just because I didn't know it existed before then. Growing up, I wanted to be an artist because I loved making things with my hands and designing things. And when I went to an all-girls school that happened to have a huge BattleBots program, which is unheard of. So I got really, really lucky there. But when I was able to work with the team and use the same skills I was using for art, but to make things that move and come alive, it all clicked for me. And I studied engineering because of it. And honestly, I can't imagine myself being anything else. Like, being an engineer is not just what you study. It's kind of like a way of looking at the world, and all my hobbies are engineering, even outside of BattleBots. So I got really lucky that I found that path. And now that, I probably built robots for 10 years before the TV show. So now that we have this platform, I think it's really important to use it to tell kids out there that this is a real career path, and it's, really, really fun and awesome and accessible to them.
It definitely is. And I mean, like, it's, it's so interesting because even, people that are in BattleBots today, like some of the younger builders that I've talked to say, you inspired them to get into robotics. It's certainly like you and Lisa Winter were 2 of the people that inspired me to be interested in this in the first place. Like I probably would have been interested in it sooner, like you said, but there weren't any, like, it seemed like that was something that guys did, and that wasn't something that, you know, that I should be interested in. But then when you see, you know, somebody on TV and you're like, oh, you know, I think it kind of changes the perspective a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people ask me about the gap in STEM between the genders, and I purposely don't talk a lot about it on the show because I think it's actually counterproductive. The girls are watching me do this among a bunch of people. There's women on a lot of other teams, and they're never questioning whether or not I belong there. They love watching Witch Doctor and the whole show, and maybe we're their favorite, maybe we're not. Um, but I think the biggest change comes from the parents that are watching with their kids. I've had a lot of conversations with dads who watch with their son and daughter and are surprised their daughter is more into it. And then that leads them, you know, next time they're working in the garage or they're making something or fixing something around the house, they'll reach out to their daughter and see if they want to help. And a lot of times there are. And that's where I think the gap comes from. You know, boys grew up given tools and working with their dads in the garage on their cars. So when they get to middle school or high school where there are robotics teams, a lot of the times the boys are really comfortable with tools and girls have never held a hammer before. So they need a little time to close that gap. But once they do, I think the girls are just as creative and just as likely to build really awesome stuff. And the best stuff comes when everybody, you know, works together. The diversity really makes it really, really an awesome result.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm also kind of curious, you know, because obviously one thing that you've been really busy with is the Destructathon, which I think is it's such an interesting way to give people an opportunity to see robots live. You know, when, you know, it's hard with only 2 weeks or so of filming to plan and say, okay, I'm going to come out for this, but it gives people a little bit more of an accessible way to see these robots. But I'm sure this has been a very busy time for you because there's a lot to do to kind of keep up with it.
Yeah, we designed an entirely new Witch Doctor for Destructathon for the live show because the set of requirements is totally different. You know, we'll call it TV show Witch Doctor is designed to be on the cutting edge. Everything is, you know, on the edge to be competitive and you know, about to not work. We have to service things in between matches, you know, extensively. We're a team of 10 people working on the robot, and that's just not feasible for Destructathon. So we actually built a whole robot that's designed to not take damage the way that ours does. We were able to put more weight into the frame because there's no weight limit in Destructathon. We designed it to be easy to repair. You know, it's just a lot of little differences that really make the show feasible, you know, because it's extremely expensive to compete on BattleBots, but we're competing to win the highest level award in the sport, you know. And that's not designed to make the sport accessible where Destructathon is. And I'm really excited that Destructathon is designed for the audience. I've definitely talked to people, you know, a lot of people love seeing the live filming of the TV show, especially if they're super fans. But for more casual fans, they'll go see the TV filming and kind of be a little disappointed because there's a match every half hour. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they aren't. You don't know who you're going to watch. It's designed for the competition and the TV show. It's not designed for the audience. But Destructathon is designed to put on a show. You know, you're going to see if a robot gets stuck, the other robot's going to unstick them and keep the match going. You're not trying to win. You're trying to put on a show and really show off what these robots can do. And that's really, really exciting.
Yes, absolutely. It is something that is very different. And I think, you know, fans need to understand, you know, what those differences are between the two. So that's kind of important. And then like the last thing that I wanted to touch on is just, you know, you mentioned earlier about the pit pass. I think it's such a cool idea. I mean, a lot of teams have been doing some of the social media content, but, you know, like myself as a content creator, there's things that like you have insight on or access to that I simply wouldn't. And I think like it's a really unique way to give the fans a real inside look at what a BattleBots team is doing.
Yeah, I have my own fandoms outside of BattleBots. I'm super into musical theater and I'm really into F1, Formula One racing. So in both of those fandoms, I love watching everything I could possibly find. You know, for F1, I have F1 TV and I watch all the practice sessions and I love hearing the tech talks. So I wanted to provide something for our fans that kind of was similar to that experience. You know, Drive to Survive totally revolutionized the Formula One industry here in the United States, because you connect to not just the cars, but to the people and the struggle and the engineering behind it. And obviously, we're not producing Drive to Survive; that's impossible. But we're trying to still share kind of like the same sentiments and the same journey that we're taking as people. You know, BattleBots is an emotional roller coaster. We're exhausted. We're working really hard, and we're trying to share some of those timelines. An episode we posted recently was about the actual build. Our team is spread all over the country, and we all fly. They fly actually to South Florida, where we're based out of, and we basically have a weekend to make it all happen. And with our luck, we had a hurricane hit us, Hurricane Ian, which was huge here in Florida. So, you know, right in the middle of it. And that's, you know, storylines that the show can't possibly capture because there's 50 teams competing. But it's definitely a big part of our experience on the show, and we're excited to share it with everybody else. You know, it kind of looks easy on TV. So we're excited to show you the struggles behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. It is definitely not easy. I can attest for how long I have been doing these shows and talking to builders. Not easy at all. Well, that's all very exciting. I'm sure, you know, fans are excited to see the rest of the season and how things go for Witch Doctor. But I so appreciate you taking the time, you know, to talk with me today, because fans love Witch Doctor, and you know, I want to make sure that I have one of my daughter's favorite people in robotics on the show. Yeah, and you know, for fans that are watching, obviously, please continue to, you know, like, subscribe, support combat robotics. I will say that every show, so important. And just, you know, keep watching, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest support that you can give teams is definitely, you know, encouragement. We put a lot of ourselves out there, so kind comments on social media can go a really a long way. You know, the haters on social media are really loud, and it can feel like they overpower. But especially with the YouTube series we've been doing, it's actually helped us communicate a lot with fans who are seeing, you know, a little bit more, knowing us more personally beyond the show, and we're having some great conversations as a result of that. But it was awesome to see you out at BattleBots, and it's great that you're doing this podcast to get more content out there, because obviously every team doesn't want to produce their own YouTube series. It's a lot of work, and you're helping them still get their stories out. So that's awesome.
Yes, exactly. Like, you know, everybody remember, it's a robot competition, but there's still people behind the robots. And I think it's so important to tell those stories, because, you know, just everyone puts a lot of work into it and works really hard. And, you know, it's like you do really cool things. And I think that that's great.